How did you deal with your crazy in-law? Ray was trouble and had a long history of drugs, violence, and bad decisions that bled into everyone's lives, especially my sister's. He dragged her into his chaos for years, using up second chances like pocket change. My family tried to help, but nothing ever stuck. Ray had this way of turning every situation into a threat, a showdown where he had to come out on top. It was just who he was. And on that night, I found myself in his crosshairs. After closing up at the pizza shop where I worked, my boss handed me a box of leftover slices as a small perk of the job. The alley on the way home was dark and damp, the air heavy with the smell of trash and grease. Halfway through, I heard the crunch of glass ahead and stopped. Out of the shadows stepped Ray. He looked worse than usual, as if the streets had finally chewed him up. His once sharp features were sunken, his eyes bloodshot and twitching. He reeked of booze and sweat. In one hand, he clutched a broken bottle. In the other, a bent tire iron. His lips curled into a sneer when he saw me. "You think you've won, don't you?" His voice was sharp and uneven, rising like a tide about to crash. "Walking around like you're the good guy, acting like you're some damn hero while you stab me in the back." My heart pounded as I tried to determine where this was coming from. "Ray, I don't know what you're talking about. Don't lie to me." His grip on the bottle tightened, and his eyes burned with fury. "You think I don't see what you've been doing? Whispering in your sister's ear, turning her against me? You stole her from me, and now you want me gone too." I didn't get a chance to speak before he closed the distance between us. The bottle slashed through the air, catching my cheek. Pain flared as blood ran hot down my neck. The shock of it made me stumble, but I kept my eyes on him. His anger boiled over, his words spilling out like venom. He swung the tire iron next, narrowly missing my head. The sound of it cutting through the air snapped me into action. I couldn't reason with him, and there was no way I could outrun him in that narrow alley. Survival instinct took over. I threw the pizza box at him, its greasy weight landing square in his chest. He staggered, giving me a chance to lunge for the tire iron. My hands wrapped around it, and after a brief struggle, I wrested it from his grip. He stumbled back, caught off guard, but his fury didn't waver. With the tire iron in my hands, something shifted inside me. I swung it low, aiming for his knee. The crack of bone was sickening, but it dropped him. He screamed, writhing on the ground, yet still tried to claw his way toward me. I stepped back, gripping the iron tightly, my breath in ragged gasps. When he reached out again, I swung for his shoulder. He crumpled fully this time, his body folding in on itself. Blood smeared the ground beneath him, and his groans grew faint. My boss's voice broke through the haze, pulling me back to reality. He rushed down the alley, his face pale as he entered the scene. "Come on," he said, gripping my arm and guiding me away from Ray. "Let's get you cleaned up." Back at the pizza shop, my boss cursed at me, rushing to call the cops. The sting of Prosecco on my wound snapped me out of the shock as I leaned against the counter, blood dripping onto the floor. When the police arrived, they assessed the situation quickly. One of them knelt beside Ray's broken form, shaking his head as he called in an ambulance. "He did what he had to," the officer told my boss as they took my statement. "It's self-defense. No charges." Ray was carted off to the hospital, where they pieced him back together, but he was never the same. The injuries left him in a wheelchair, and he spent the next few years in and out of prison. My sister finally cut ties for good, filing for divorce the moment he was sentenced.